It's June. Happy Pride Month.
Yep.
You can't see my rainbow earrings, but anyway, we are so happy to have you here tonight. Thank you to Sarah Powers, our staff member who's managing this, and our speaker, Madeline Balser, who's Zooming in from California. Welcome to Together Women Rise's June webinar and our conversation about breaking the cycle of poverty for refugee women and girls through our grantee, RefuSHE. I'm Betsy Teutsch. I'm a member of the Together Women Rise Board of Directors. I'm finishing my 6th and final year. And I'm also a co-leader of a chapter here in Philly. And I'm tonight's moderator. Whether this is your first Rise event or you're a returning participant, we're really glad to have you this evening. Rise is a powerful community of women and allies dedicated to achieving global gender equality, which is under even more assault than it was when we started, I think. Together, we learn about and advocate for gender equality issues, give grants to organizations empowering women and girls in low-income communities in the global South, like we're going to hear about tonight. But we also build community to forge meaningful connections with each other and with women around the world. Our model is based on collective giving. By harnessing the power of coming together, all contributions are valued, and we can make a more powerful impact than we would individually. If you are interested in becoming a member or making a donation to support our mission, please visit our website at togetherwomenrise.org. And I know Sarah's going to be dropping that in the chat a few times. A couple of Zoom reminders. Please keep yourself on mute while our speakers are presenting. There's going to be Q&A after Madeline and I have a conversation. So please put your questions in the chat and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And there is closed captioning. So if you hover over the bottom to the toolbar, you can set it up for however you want, language, and if you want subtitles. For anyone who is interested in extending our discussion, after the formal 1-hour presentation, please remain on, and I'm going to be here to lead a discussion. Really just make sure that everybody has something, is heard, and has a chance to share a bit. Informal, not necessarily even about the program. It can be about anything that you want to talk about tonight. It's time to turn to tonight's program. At these monthly webinars, you have the opportunity to learn about the challenges and issues faced by women and girls in low-income communities in the Global South, as well as the important work that together our RISE community funds through our grants program. This month, we're focusing on breaking the cycle of poverty for refugee women who wind up in Kenya. They don't start out in Kenya. And girls in Kenya through education, mental health care, and leadership training. They even do yoga. First, we're going to play a short video, and then we will talk with Madeline Balser, our speaker.
Refugee Kenya. Refugee seeks to protect, educate, and empower young, unaccompanied, separated, vulnerable refugee girls and Kenyans to ensure that their lives are redeemed, they are healed, and they are able to continue with their day-to-day lives. At RefuSHE, we intervene through a holistic model, and this helps us to ensure that the girls not only get the technical bit of the training, but also get to have their mental health attended to, yoga, the peace interventions, ensuring that they have a meal every day, their transport is taken care of, and equally a daycare that ensures their children are nurtured as their mothers love. We were founded in 2008, and through this, the core of the woman became the ultimate goal in ensuring that she is well taken care of. Kenya hosts around 823,932 refugees and asylum seekers, of which 109,476 are urban refugees residing in Nairobi, peri-urban areas, Mombasa, and Isiolo, among others. This population has a lot of unmet needs of protection, education, and generally self-reliance. RefuSHE comes in to intervene in some of these challenges that they face. Protection is the core mandate, integrated with also life-saving interventions as well as education interventions. So for an urban refugee and specifically women, we look at the various protection concerns they face and approach it from that particular lens so that we fulfill our mandate of empowering, educating, and ensuring the healing is there. So, as part of our core mandate, the Together Women Rise comes in at a very opportune moment where we've been facing funding challenges, and thus through beauty and fashion, which is one of the best programs that we've had 100% pass in the National Industrial Training Authority test, this grant will fulfill the needs of 36 young women and their children. We envisage to have it run for 2 years, one starting with the current cohort of 10, and then the other one will be having the cohort of 26. With the funding, we are very grateful to Together Women Rise, because then the dreams, the aspirations of the girls shall be fulfilled, not just from an education lens, but also from a holistic perspective, where services such as meals, transport, and mental health support shall be accorded. Thank you.
It's a really inspiring program, and we're going to hear a lot more about it. Thank you for the spotlight. I'm going to introduce Madeline Balser. She is here tonight from Ventura, California. I know we have a bunch of Californians on, north of Los Angeles, but has spent time in Nairobi at the program. She'll probably tell us some about that. She is a senior manager of development and communications at RefuSHE. And this organization was founded, as we heard, to support orphaned, unaccompanied, and separated refugee girls and young women in Kenya. So imagine, being there as a young woman, often with children that you didn't want to have, without any family or extended family support in a foreign country. Madeline has spent the past 3.5 years helping to build strategic partnerships, amplify the organization's mission, and expand outreach efforts. A dedicated nonprofit professional with over 5 years of experience in development, communications, and grants management, Madeline is passionate about supporting programs that empower refugee girls and young women. She has a bachelor's degree in health science and a master's degree in public health. Madeline, thank you for coming tonight. After our Q&A session, which will be about a half hour, there will be time for you to ask questions, which you can put into the chat column. So, Madeline, RefuSHE supports unaccompanied and separated refugee girls in Nairobi. I guess that means separated from their families, who are somewhere else. And this group is often overlooked in humanitarian response. Can you share what inspired the organization's creation and how its mission has evolved to meet the shifting needs of today's displaced young women in Africa?
Definitely. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So RefuSHE was founded in 2008 by 2 women, Anne Sweeney and Talon Good. They were already working in the refugee space in Kenya, and then they saw that there's this critical unmet need for girls and young women that were arriving in the city of Nairobi that had been separated from their families. They'd been orphaned due to war, conflict, and they were showing up with very little protection, very little resources. A lot of them had their education interrupted, and obviously they were living outside of the designated refugee camps. So RefuSHE was born out of that unmet need to take care of this very specific population that has very niche needs. We've expanded a lot throughout the years. When we were first founded, we were called Heshima Kenya. Now we're RefuSHE, but our mission has always stayed the same, and that is to protect, educate, and empower orphaned, separated, and unaccompanied refugee girls and young women to build healthier and more resilient lives for themselves and their children.
It's a tall order. I mean, we know just what immigration under the best of circumstances is really challenging. Exactly. But if you come with no family and no money and no rights, no training, it's really challenging. The global refugee crisis is more severe today than ever before, globally. What are you seeing in Kenya, and what is causing the increase in refugee girls and young women? Where are these girls coming from, and what is the situation that they're fleeing from?
Yeah, so Kenya is home to a longstanding, protracted refugee crisis. In the video, as Rose had mentioned, there's almost 1 million refugees currently living in Kenya. The majority of those do live in designated refugee camps, but at this point, over 100,000 are living in urban areas like Nairobi, the capital. So these women and young girls are coming from all over East Africa. A lot of our girls come from the Congo, Somalia, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Burundi, and most of them are fleeing war and conflict, violence, political instability, human rights violations, and also drought and results of climate change as well. So they're coming from all over East Africa. They've walked a lot of different paths, but they end up in the city because they're trying to seek usually more freedom and economic opportunities that they wouldn't necessarily have in the camps.
And I'm a little uninformed. So they come to Kenya because Kenya has more open, is more open to refugees.
Yeah, correct.
Like a hot
Kenya
button in our country.
historically- Right, exactly. Yeah, historically, Kenya has had a very open and welcoming attitude towards refugees. The Kenyan government actually just launched a 12-year, it's called the Sharika Plan, and it's kind of trying to integrate refugees into the community because we're seeing more and more that resettlement is not as much of a realistic pathway as it used to be. So these refugees are coming to Kenya and they're staying in Kenya. So now the government is committed to how do we integrate these refugees into the community and make them now part of our culture as well. So yeah, I think Kenya hosts so many refugees because one, we have the camps set up that are UNHCR funded, but two, it's just the attitude I think is progressive and has long been welcoming to refugees.
What about language? Do these women, young women, have common languages?
It's a great question. So yeah, they come from all different countries, all different cultures, and with that comes different languages. So a lot of the girls show up and they do not speak English, they do not speak Swahili. A lot of them are just speaking their native tongue, or they speak French because they come from the Congo. So one positive thing is that they can find common language with the other girls on the campus. They find community through that, but they do pick up both languages, English and Swahili, remarkably quickly. So that's really impressive to see. But yeah, a lot of them come and they do not know English, they do not know Swahili, and all they have is kind of their native tongue. And yeah, they're starting from scratch.
Wow. Okay, so refugee girls in Nairobi face unique barriers in accessing education. As you pointed out, they're young, so their education, if they were still in school, was probably disrupted or ended, and economic opportunities. So what are some of those barriers, and how is RefuSHE working to break them down?
Yep. So as I mentioned, these refugees, instead of going to the camps, they decide to come to the city because there's usually more freedom, economic opportunity, but with that comes more vulnerabilities. So these girls are a lot more vulnerable to human rights violations, trafficking, gender-based violence, forced marriages, etc. And so they come to the city and they lack a lot of protection. As you'd mentioned, a lot of them are lacking education. If they had been educated in the first place, it was interrupted when they had to flee their country. So they don't have formal education. A lot of them don't have access to a bank account, or they don't have a legal permit to work. All of those kind of just practical things that we take for granted make it really hard for them to secure jobs. So usually they're kind of forced into the informal sector and kind of just making money under the table. And a lot of them are lacking kind of like legal documentation as refugees as well. So those are some of the things that we try to address through our holistic model. We know that when these girls show up, a lot of them don't have safe shelter, they don't have food, they don't have education or skills. So we kind of start from the bottom and work our way up and take a holistic lens, which I think I'll probably speak more about later. But yeah, we try and take a practical approach, make sure they have transportation to our campus, they have daily meals, there's childcare, etc.
How long would one of your members of this community typically be with you?
It's a good question. There's kind of a range. I think it could be as short as 6 months. Maybe they come through one of the vocational training programs and they're secure in other ways and they just want to do the program and get on with their life. But then some will come and they'll start in our safe house, which is off campus, and that's 24-hour safe shelter that we host girls in for usually up to 6 months. So maybe they'll start there and then transition into some of our other programs, and they'll be with us for 3 or 4 years, going through the different programs. And a lot of girls go on to join our artisan collective, which is the social enterprise model. They make these beautiful scarves by hand, the tie and dye. So a lot of the girls have been there for quite some time because I think they find community there and they are able to become leaders in their own right within the organization. Some girls stay on as interns as well. So there's a range, but I'd say 6 months to 6 years.
Well, I think you have a lot of mothers here on this call, maybe even some grandmothers, and thinking about all these young women with nobody to sort of take care of them or guide them. I imagine that the group experience and your staff replaces family for a lot of these girls. They must, if they bond, which I'm sure is the goal, they become their Kenya family.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of great community that happens, and we also we have our women ambassadors for the community. So these are older refugee women, and a lot of them will actually act as foster parents to the younger girls in our programs, and they help refer them to our programs as well. So yeah, there's a really beautiful community, I think, that happens both on our campus and off campus.
These are some of the things about our grantees that are not always evident on paper.
Yeah.
When you hear what's going on, you can kind of put two and two together and understand it better.
Yeah.
RISE, this is the second time we have funded this organization. Earlier, about 13 years ago, we did. It was an earlier iteration of the organization. Anyway, it's fun to come back and see how it's growing and succeeded, and imagine all the girls that we funded then are probably some of the women who are fostering and nurturing and mentoring the ones who are there now. It's a $50,000 grant supporting the Girls Empowerment Program, which prepares these young refugee women for academic success and economic independence. So tell us some of the program's core components, and how do you help participants move from survival to self-reliance?
Sure. So our Girls Empowerment Program, this used to be kind of our overarching education program, where it was like accelerated primary education. But then the Kenyan government's education requirements shifted. So we shifted along with them. And we also incorporated feedback that we got from the girls that they really wanted to focus on vocational training, because a lot of them would finish school, but then have no real skills to apply to the job. So they wanted employable skills. So we've kind of revamped the Girls Empowerment Program, and now it's focused on vocational skills training. And we currently have 3 tracks. We have tailoring and design. So a lot of those girls go on to do the Artisan Collective. We have digital skills. So they learn how to create websites, do social media management, video transcriptions, things like that. And then we have beauty and nail art, which we just launched. That was highly requested by the girls. It's a very lucrative business in Nairobi, doing like the braiding and all of that as well. So those are the 3 tracks that we have that the girls can pick from. But then when girls are enrolled in the Girls Empowerment Program, they also have access to all these other holistic services. So mental health is really important on our campus. We know that these girls have come from very traumatic backgrounds, and we can't really expect them to thrive in a classroom environment unless their mental health is stable. Those needs have been addressed first. So that's really important in our program. We have one-on-one counseling, we have group counseling, we have trauma-informed yoga, as you mentioned, we have Zumba classes as well, and then we also do these science of trauma workshops where we educate girls on what trauma does to the body, how you can self-soothe and kind of move forward, and it just creates this really safe space for them to talk to each other and relate with their experiences, and just be listened to in a safe environment. And then aside from that, they also have access to legal aid services. So if they need help getting their documentation, if they need help with resettlement pathways, we have a legal aid officer that assists them with that. And then we have mentorship opportunities. So we'll have partners come on and do like business trainings, and even business loans. So these girls can jumpstart their future as entrepreneurs once they graduate the program. Then we also have our on-site childcare, because as you mentioned, a lot of these girls come from forced marriages and forced pregnancy backgrounds. So while they are children, a lot of them do have children themselves. So we have an on-site childcare so they can focus on their studies and their kids are in good hands. We also do our daily meals and transportation support. So the Girls Empowerment Program is overarching, it's vocational training, but then it's so much more than that. They get all these other resources, because we want to take them out of that survival mode where they're just, wondering where their next meal is coming from, to feeling like they are confident and empowered and they have a community behind them and they can actually pursue their goals and support themselves and their families.
As you mentioned, the Girls Empowerment Program is a holistic approach, and I'm on the board of Together Women Rise, and one of the projects when I was chair of the Community Building and Learning Board Committee is that we did a review of all the grants that we've given over our now 20, going on 22 years. And in virtually one of the consistent through lines was that our grantees have holistic, or we call them integrated programs. In other words, we don't do like one-offs, just one solution. These are integrated solutions because our belief is that that is really just going to be much more effective. So why don't you talk a little bit about the philosophy of the holistic approach and ways in which the different things that you do reinforce and strengthen the outcome.
Definitely.
Kind of synchronicity that you get from integrated
Right.
solutions.
Yeah, I think we've realized that there is no one size fits all approach when it comes to anybody really, but especially these refugee girls that are coming from different cultures, have experienced different kinds of trauma. So when they come to our campus, their first point of contact is our case management team. So we do a needs assessment. We understand what kind of education has this girl had, what kind of trauma has she been through, what is her language, her culture, and where does she want to go from here? And then from there, we create an individualized care plan for each one of these girls and young women that comes to our campus. So we say, okay, maybe she needs to start at the safe house because she doesn't have a safe place to live right now, or maybe she can start with the vocational training program and her kid can go to childcare during the day. So I think by taking a holistic approach, we're making sure that we're meeting all of the different needs, because obviously this kind of healing and empowerment does not happen in isolation. We need to factor in all of these things, and different girls need different things. Some of them need a lot more legal support. Some of them need more financial support. Some need more emotional support. So I think by having all of those different programs on our campus, we make sure that there's a little bit of something for everybody and we're seeing the whole picture. So that kind of creates more, I think, sustainability for success in the future for these girls. So they're not just leaving with, you know, some education, but they're also feeling like they have the mental strength and empowerment to pursue whatever they need to do.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the childcare, is that like every day?
Yeah, well, 5 days a week. So the girls come to the campus usually 4 to 5 days a week. So the childcare runs, I believe it's 8 to 4. So those are the typical school hours. Yeah.
And are there classes in parenting or any of those?
We have done some workshops, yeah, in parenting, and especially for girls that go to the safe house, there's a lot of, because a lot of the girls at the safe house will actually be pregnant at the time that they arrive, and so they do a lot of like kind of prenatal classes, parenting classes, etc. Because you know a lot of them have wound up pregnant against their will, so it's kind of just trying to get them into a better mental state about it, and you know making them feel a little bit more cared for and confident in taking on the motherhood role.
And what about like healthcare and
Yeah, we partner with a few.
education about sex? There's a whole acronym for it, but sex
Yeah,
education, probably a lot of the girls didn't have any of that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do partner with a few hospitals in Nairobi to provide medical care, to provide prenatal care, all of that. Sex education has also happened. It's a little tricky because of all the different cultures and religious beliefs that we have with the girls. That tends to be a little bit of a point of conflict, just because the culture beliefs are so different, and you know we're not here to force a certain perspective or anything like that. But gender-based violence is a big thing that we educate about. So I think oftentimes it goes hand in hand, just knowing that you know your body is your body, and kind of understanding that bodily autonomy and what that means.
Wonderful. So you have the program has a strong emphasis on leadership development.
Mhm.
And honestly, any woman that managed to get herself to Kenya in these incredibly adverse circumstances just has a lot of internal drive to begin with. It didn't just happen
Yeah.
that they arrived there. Can you share a personal story of a young woman or a couple of stories of people who have gone through your program and stepped into a leadership or change maker role?
Yeah, we have
Fun
so
to
many.
hear, you know, the
Mhm.
numbers are one thing, but the stories are another.
Yeah, it's true. The qualitative impact. We have so many stories, but I think one that stands out right now is we have this girl, Joy. She's a young woman. She's now 21 and she came from Burundi. And so she fled to Kenya. When she arrived, she spoke very little English, very shy, very introverted, not social at all. But we enrolled her in our digital skills program. So she started kind of learning the different computer skills. And over time, she began to open up. She began to make friends. She began to get more comfortable. And she really started to excel in the classes. And then we saw that she had a really good eye for photography and videography. And once she finished the 6-month vocational training program, we actually gave her the opportunity to be an intern on our communications team. And she has just thrived in the role. She is still our communications intern. I think she will probably move up because she's just been blowing us all away. She has really great videography skills and a really great eye for photography. And I think it's just helped her really step out of her shell. And now she is well connected with the girls. She obviously understands their perspective, so they feel very comfortable opening up to her. And she's able to gather these impact stories. She does these photo shoots with the girls. So she's just kind of this perfect go-between. I think they all look up to her too to see, okay, here's where I came from, but here's where I could go. So we have so many great stories like that, but I think we really love those full circle moments where the girls kind of stay in our community and we get to watch them thrive.
Thank you. So how do you see your work rippling? The ripple effect is also something that's really hard to quantify and doesn't always show up on paper. But when we do our grants, we generally ask the applicant to say how many direct people are enrolled in the program, direct recipients or whatever you want to, participants, let's call them. But then all the indirect benefits that come from those girls' connections and circles. So talk to us about their families, their communities, or the changing narratives around refugees and women in Kenya.
Sure. Yeah, I think we typically say that for every single girl that's directly impacted by our programs, there's about 3 to 4 other people that are indirectly affected by it. And usually that's because a lot of these girls will be the sole breadwinner for their family. They will have come to Kenya with siblings and they're tasked with the responsibility of maintaining the household and providing for all these siblings. So when they gain skills that make them employable, that obviously translates to their family as well. So I think that's one way. And then another way is that we do a lot of community workshops. Mostly they're on gender-based violence prevention and response. But these are off campus. They're usually older individuals in the urban refugee community. But for those workshops, we'll have anywhere from like 1,000 to 2,000 people participate per year. And they are always bringing in other people. And so I think the word really spreads about these workshops and about the resources that we have available. We also have our women's ambassador groups where we help facilitate loans for local refugee women that have businesses. And so from there, they bring in other friends and community members that have businesses, and they all pool together their money to do like a revolving loan. And then that helps all of their businesses thrive. So I think we're really big on this expansive impact and making sure that there's this ripple effect with our work. But I think a lot of the girls that end up on our campus are referred from girls that have previously been on the campus or women in the women ambassadors group. So yeah, I think we like to think that we obviously have all the impact on our campus, but it ripples out into the refugee community as a whole.
Mm-hmm. You haven't mentioned anything about refugee men, but I would imagine that if you have a lot of lovely, attractive women in your program, there must be some men aware of them. So how does that work? I guess they don't. Yeah. And also, if you could explain, it's one of the questions, but why don't maybe you can explain it, how, you know, you have campus, you have safe house, and then people live elsewhere. So describe how that all works.
Sure. Yeah, I know we have so many programs. Sometimes it's hard to get the visual unless you're physically there. So we have our campus where our administrative offices are also located. So all of our Kenya staff work from these offices, but then that's also where the classrooms are for the vocational training. That's where the childcare is for the girls in the programs. We have a little like cafeteria station for meals. So the girls that are coming to our campus are commuting every day. So they live in the community in Nairobi and they commute. Separate from that, we have our safe house, which is 24/7 shelter with security and everything. And that's off campus. Girls can stay there up to 6 months, girls and their children. That's
And girls are referred there because of some particular trauma or
yeah, usually if they have protection issues or insecurity in their housing, they don't have a safe place to live, or yeah, they just need a little bit more protection or mental health support, then they'll go to the safe house. And especially yeah, if they have young children too. So that's off campus, and then separate from that, we have our community workshops that we hold in different places all over the community. We try and go to places that are easily accessible, so people aren't having to get on a bus or anything like that. So those are kind of the three different, I guess, pockets of refugee. But yes, the men. Everyone always asks, refugee. Well, what about the men? So I mean, there's a few different things. Obviously, like I mentioned, we do a lot of gender-based violence prevention workshops, and we've started to involve the men because we know that the majority of time the men are the perpetrators. And so we can't really make change if we aren't involving these people. And so men attend a lot of our community workshops, and that's a big way that they get involved. And I think that they do find it eye-opening, and we're able to kind of give insight and all of that. So that's one way that we involve men. And then in our childcare, we obviously have, young boys 0 to 5, but we do focus on girls and young women. I think we feel like when they are in this container where they just get to focus on themselves, their career, their healing without the distraction of the guys, they really get to flourish, and it creates a really safe community. But off campus, the guys are definitely there. We know because a lot of the girls come to our campus pregnant. So the guys are definitely there. But our hope is that we can kind of help them stand on their own 2 feet. And no matter what is happening in their personal life, they feel safe, they feel empowered, and they feel economically stable.
Great. So looking ahead, what are RefuSHE's goals for the future of this program? And then we'll get to all these questions. Sarah's going to share that, but tell us about some of the future goals.
Right. So as I mentioned, we just added a new track to our vocational training program, the beauty and nail arts, but we are trying to add even more tracks because we've heard the feedback from the girls. So some of the things they're really interested in are baking, hair braiding, and construction is something that we've actually had a partner with. They're called RefuSHE, and it's in Nairobi. We've partnered with them a few times and sent girls through them. So we've talked about kind of doing a more long-term collaboration with them where girls learn construction skills. We've actually had one participant go on and like build her own house from scratch using, the tools that she learned from the Build Her program. So that's one of the big goals for Girls Empowerment Program, is just to add a few more tracks. So we make sure that we're meeting the needs of these girls, we're staying relevant to whatever is happening in Nairobi, in their economy there. And then I think just staff capacity and being able to enroll more girls. We have so many girls that apply to all of our programs, and we're just not able to admit them all because we don't have the staff capacity. We don't necessarily have the classroom space or the resources because, it costs a bit of money to offer all of these holistic services to these girls. And we want to make sure that the care they're getting is high quality. So we only admit as many girls as we can actually provide that care to. So I think those are some of the big goals now that we've kind of settled into Girls Empowerment Program being a vocational training focused program, just hoping to expand the tracks and accept more girls.
Okay, I'm going to take the prerogative and just ask one more question, because I know that refugees really struggle with documentation and lacking, their birth certificates. Some of them might not have even had their births recorded in the countries that they were born in if they were unstable countries at war. Yeah. And if refugees don't have documentation, then it's even harder. So you mentioned that you have legal services to help with that. So what's a typical situation?
Yeah, so we have our legal aid officer, and she helps with all of those kind of situations, whether it's helping them file the different paperwork that they need to receive the proper documentation that will allow them to work or, legally be here in Kenya. She helps with that. Any other legal processes that need to be navigated, or if there are like court dates or anything like that, oftentimes we'll accompany them to those to make sure, if there's a language barrier, they have the support that they need. Obviously, navigating any kind of legal process is complex, but if you don't speak the language, it's even harder. So those are a few ways. And then also we have a partner, Equity Bank, and they help us open bank accounts for the refugee girls, because a lot of times you are not able to open a bank account if you're a refugee, if you don't have proper status. So that's really important, because obviously if you're going to have a job, if you're going to open a business, you need a bank account. So just practical things like that, we help them navigate. We also have partners that we do the resettlement process through, like HIAS and UNHCR. And so we kind of get them started on that path and make sure that there's a clear pathway for them if they're looking to resettle, or if they're looking to go back to their home country as well.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah, you want to read some of the questions?
Yeah, so thank you so much for answering all the questions we had already. And we've had quite a few people put their questions in the chat. And if you haven't had a chance to, there's still time, so please feel free to put it down there and I will read them out. So the first question we have is actually about the scarf you're wearing. People are wondering if you can lead us to where they might be able to purchase their own scarves. Like, do you have a place on your website, or is there a best place for them to get a hold of their own personal scarf?
Yep, here I'm putting in the chat, shop.refushe.org. It's also, if you go to refushe.org, there's a button that's shop, but these are our artisan collective products. We do sell them online. I think we ship, I want to say worldwide, but definitely in the US. We've got scarves, I think there's kimonos, headbands, scrunchies, and they're all handmade by the girls in the Artisan Collective. So all of the funds get reinvested back into them. They earn a stipend so they can support their families, and they're well made and they're beautiful. So yes, shop.refushe.org. Thanks for asking.
That's wonderful. Thank you. We always love being able to support the women in any way we can, and looking fashionable too.
Great.
The next question we had was about the age of the young women. I know there's some that are children themselves and coming with children, but like your typical women and young girls that you're working with, like what's the average age range that you're seeing typically?
Yeah, usually in the Girls Empowerment Program, it's like 18 to 24. And then in our Safe House, recently there was a shift, and now it's girls 17 and under, mostly that have kids. So it's girls 17 and under that have kids or that are pregnant. And in the community, we work with all ages. So, we have women in their 50s and 60s who have been in Kenya for a long time and are kind of like refugee veterans. And they help with the foster care for the younger girls or referring younger girls to our programs. But I think like 18 to 24 is kind of the age of most of the girls.
Thank you. Somebody was asking how many girls are in your program, which you've kind of talked a little bit about. I know you'd love to have like infinite staffing capacity and things like that, but how are you also like measuring what's successful, which I'm assuming is, people who are going on to, have jobs and whatever they're pursuing with education, those types of things. But can you talk a bit about how many girls are in your program, maybe a bit about the process of how they're admitted, and then like, how are you measuring success and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so we serve around, I think it's 150 girls in the Girls Empowerment Program each year. We do a lot of things to try and measure the success. We have a monitoring and evaluation individual, and then we also have a couple interns, usually past alumni from the Girls Empowerment Program. And so they help do kind of pre and post assessment surveys to see. One of the things we measure is, are these girls able to account for at least 50% of their household expenses? Another thing we measure is, were these girls able to get an internship or a job within 6 months of completing the program? And then we do other things kind of more in the mental health realm. If they feel like they understand what trauma is and how it works in their body, if they feel safe in their community, if they feel like they are better able to take care of themselves, et cetera. We also have our trauma-informed yoga program. We've done a lot of studies with that, seeing, has it improved their sleep, their mood, their, like bodily aches and pains, their attitude, anything like that. So we definitely do a lot of assessments because we're very keen on knowing if our programs are actually having their intended impact on the girls that we serve.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's like even deeper than I thought, like even going down to like, are these individual things like really successful in like changing like mindsets for the girls and making sure that they're feeling safe and in tune with their body. So that's incredible. So it's great to hear. The next one we have is about how many people can reside in this safe house at one time.
The capacity is 70. We rarely have that many. It's usually about half that, like 30 or 35, but it does fluctuate. So it can be 70, but it's usually like 30 to 35.
So one of the questions is about the eligibility for the program. I know you've had, capacity within limitations, but how do you determine who can participate? And is it pretty much open to anybody who's a refugee from who's living in Nairobi, or are there other things that they have to qualify for?
Yeah, usually it is, are they a refugee? Are they in the age range? Are they able to get to the campus? We do offer transportation support, but, are they able to get to campus? And kind of why they're interested in the program. And so we do try and accept as many people as we can. It usually just comes down to that we don't have the capacity. So there aren't too many things that disqualify the girls outside of age, if they're a refugee, and if they can get to the campus. So yeah, we don't have like very rigid standards in terms of that. We try and accept as many girls as we can.
That's fair.
Mm.
So somebody was wondering if there's government support for the refugees, and then do you work with the government and receive funds from like the local government and receive funds from them at all?
We don't receive funds from the Kenya government, but we are very involved with them. We kind of helped with the informing of the Sharika plan that I talked about, trying to integrate refugees into the community. And we do a lot of meetings with like UNHCR that's stationed in Kenya, and some of the other government groups. But unfortunately, there's not much money there. The philanthropy culture isn't all that great in Kenya. So no, previously we have not received money from the Kenyan government, definitely other governments, but not the Kenyan government. But we are kind of well aligned with them, and we try and work closely and have like a good working partnership with them.
This is just kind of a personal question off of that, because I've briefly worked on the other side of refugee resettlement where people are coming to the US and helping them there. But I was curious, as you're talking about like the Kenyan government, like what the overall perception of Kenyans is of people who are in refugee status. And I know like I've seen different countries where sometimes it's like you can't even leave a camp area, you're not allowed to work, but it seems like Kenya, at least the government is allowing people to work and whatnot. But what is your general sense of like the population, how they feel towards refugee women and girls and refugees in general?
Yeah, I think that overall and historically it's been pretty welcoming and been pretty progressive. There are a lot of nonprofits present in Kenya and in Nairobi. Um, I think that maybe there have been some difficulties because there is a high unemployment rate right now in Nairobi, especially for youth. And so, I think there may be a little bit of that sentiment of like, oh, they're coming in and taking our jobs, as is everywhere. But I think overall, it is pretty welcoming, and they do have really good resources, and the government, wants to make it a welcoming place for them, and also kind of commit to the future and the sustainability of having refugees in the country, because they're not really going anywhere. They, a very small percentage end up resettling or going back to their home country. So they're kind of here to stay in Kenya. And I think the government's taking a pretty like liberal and progressive approach to hosting them.
That's encouraging to hear. Yeah, because I've heard all sorts of things depending on what country you're in and where you're coming from. Sometimes the country you fled to cannot be always the kindest. So I'm glad to hear that while there's probably issues in Kenya, that at least that overall people seem somewhat supportive. So that's good to hear, especially with the government. We had another question from somebody who personally works in occupational therapy and is wondering how they can get involved in helping like support recovery for refugee women and girls. Maybe in their own community, they didn't specify, but if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, to be honest, I don't know that much about occupational therapy, so I'm almost like maybe you could tell me how you think you might be able to support. But yeah, I mean that's an interesting thought. I think we always have people kind of reaching out and asking the different ways that they could help and support. Obviously, physical health and mental health are a big part of the work that we do. But to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know that much about occupational therapy, but
I was wondering about that question. That's very specific. Savannah, do you want to say anything? Savannah is the one who asked that question. Savannah still on? I can't see. All right, well, put it aside for later. You can look into it.
Yeah. And I think that's all the questions that I saw, but if I missed your question, pop it in the chat real quick. Otherwise,
hi, sorry. I could not figure out how to unmute at first.
oh, that's fine.
I'm Savannah.
Hi, Savannah.
So I'm in school for occupational therapy, and we had to join a webinar to like learn more about something that we could advocate for. And we had to kind of ask some questions like that we had in mind. And so occupational therapy, it's kind of like PT is a good way to explain it. But for physical therapy, that's usually where they're like working on muscles and things like that. But occupational therapy is like focusing on meaningful activities for specific people. Like, yeah, holistic activities for people. So I'm just like wondering, is there like a certain approach that like we could do to help these people, or like is it kind of, I don't know, like I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that, but sorry.
No,
Well, maybe Madeline can put her email in the
yeah,
chat if you don't mind, and
sure.
then you could talk to each other directly.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
I imagine that some of the young women come with injuries or chronic pain from just all the stuff that they've been through, and they probably need some.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and yeah, it definitely makes me think. So I think that, yeah, obviously they come from different traumas. A lot of girls do come with injuries because they are fleeing war and conflict. A lot of them do get injured while fleeing war, whether they're in like the line of fire or it's just hard conditions while trying to get to Kenya. So a lot of them do come with physical injuries. And I feel like, as you said, OT takes kind of this holistic approach. And so I think that that could be healing also from a trauma perspective. And being trauma informed is like a big part of our work and understanding where these girls are coming from. But I think that doing kind of practical everyday tasks could, you know, kind of help like bring their confidence back and also be, yeah, healing in a few different ways. So yeah, feel free to email me. I'm happy to say more, but thank you so much for the question. I appreciate it. Yeah, best of luck with your studies too.
All right. It's nice. That's a really interesting question. Stump the speaker. All right. Well, thank you so much, Madeline, for joining us tonight and sharing the inspiring work of your organization. You look like somebody who likes her job.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you all so much for being supporters of our work. We could not do this without the generosity of people like you. So thank you for joining and thank you for supporting.
Terrific. All right. Well, it wouldn't be a webinar if I didn't have some announcements at the end. Together Women Rise depends on each of our donations to support grants for organizations, RefuSHE and the other 11 grantees every year, and our transformation partnerships. But as you can see, you know, that we are together changing the trajectory of 36 women's lives that could have been, you know, very sad lives, and will be much more productive and much more empowered because of what we're able to offer them together. So thank you. We generally work on a monthly contribution, and that's very helpful to our organization because it means that we have stable income coming in every month. But we do also, if you're a monthly donor, we thank you. We always love it when people switch to monthly donors, a monthly giving, but some people like to give annually, and a one-time gift annually. That's obviously wonderful too. And I imagine that there's a link there to donate. And donate, it's a wonderful gift to give a donation. We can send out a card to anyone that you would like to make a donation in honor of. If you were thinking that you don't want to, you know, go to Target to get a present, make a donation. Join us for more upcoming events, including our Legacy Giving webinar. That's going to be Tuesday, June 17th with Anne-Marie Ashworth. She is a financial advisor at the Abacus Planning Group. And our next monthly webinar will be July 10th, Thursday, July 10th. Note that we are moving it a week. We're usually the first week of the month to hit as many chapters as possible before they meet if they want to come on first to get our information. But because it's July 4th, we're postponing it a week. And our grantee works on trafficking prevention and keeping girls in school. To learn more about these and all of our upcoming events, you can go to the upcoming events page on our site under the Join Us tab.